Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. Today, joining me is one of my biggest heroes in the world, and she is a woman who made a difference in my life that I just can never fully express. It's so big. It's just bigger than I have words for. And one of the ways that she did that, I think, is through her great ability and skill as a leader. And so we'll talk about that. But who's joining me today is Melinda Richter, who is the global head of Johnson & Johnson Innovations JLABS. And she is an entrepreneur par excellence. And the JLABS are no strings attached incubators for big science. And I'm going to ask you, Melinda, to tell me the story of where JLABS came from. And then I want to talk about that story because I think it's one of the key leadership communication lessons and examples that I've seen in my life. It's one of the top examples of this. So welcome. Thanks for joining me, Melinda.
It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
And, just for everybody that whenever you hear this, right now it's May 20th, 2020, and we're kind of in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and people are starting to come back. And so it's a weird time. We're going to draw some lessons from that are going to be timeless. But the good news is it's hard to pin Melinda down. And Melinda, you've been at home for a while, and there you are on my video here. And it's just, I really appreciate you making the time because I know things got busier, not less busy for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the fact that I've actually been home, I think, for 10 weeks, which I don't think has happened in probably 20 years.
No, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
I think my husband may not be so appreciative of that.
Yeah. Well, hey.
Yeah, that's right. In his hair all the time. It is nice to be home. It is nice to be able to do these sorts of things now where you're actually sitting still long enough to pause and think and discuss important topics. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're super welcome. So Melinda, would you mind telling us the story of how you founded what later became JLABS?
Sure. So listen, I think with every young person in college today, I got thrilled by the tech industry. I thought it was sexy and provocative, and I was offered a career in this big global telecoms company where you could rotate around the world and work in different geographies and different business units with the express intent to be a president one day. And so I started off in Calgary. I'm Canadian. With them, I went to Toronto, went to Raleigh, North Carolina, went to London, England. Then I found myself in Beijing, and I thought I had the world by the tail. I had everything I thought I wanted. I had an amazing career trajectory. I was seeing the world, and I was making what I considered to be a lot of money at the time, which relatively speaking wasn't, but I was enamored with this life that I had until one day I was about to jet off to another location, and I decided to go to this international conference, and I had to walk through the woods, and I ended up getting literally bit by a bug. And within 24 hours, I landed in the International Health Clinic there. And it was a moment of reckoning when the doctors came in and said, we are so sorry, but there's nothing more we can do for you, and you should call your family. And it struck me, the irony that night when I wasn't sure I was going to wake up the next day, that here I was working in the tech industry, and at the time we were trying to figure out how to order sodas from the vending machines with our cell phones. And yet here I'm in this hospital, and you cannot even take a blood test and figure out what I have. And how is it possible that all this money and press and talent is going over here to this thing that seems so frivolous now, when our what a pretty basic human healthcare gap existed over here. And
Yeah.
I vowed that if I got the chance to stay here on this planet, that's where I would dedicate and spend my life on, is creating innovation to be just as advanced, as productive, as sexy in the healthcare industry as we've been doing in the tech industry. And so obviously I made it. But
I'm glad you
months,
did.
thank you. But for a few months, I had to confront what it would mean to stay here on this planet. How would I live my life? And and everybody should do this as an exercise. If you close your eyes and you imagine that you may not be here tomorrow, and you have to ask yourself the question, have I lived my life well?
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it still gives me chills. It still makes me emotional thinking about it, because that's a time of reckoning. Like, what did I do while I was here? How did I do it? And if I get the chance to stay here, I know I'm going to be asked that question of myself again. And the next time I'm going to be really ready for that. I'm going to be able to answer it in a way where I'm like, I'm good to go because I did everything that I could in a way that makes me proud. Yeah. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And it's, I probably should have gone for therapy, actually, because I did what everybody thought was crazy. I quit my very lucrative job, my very promising career. I sold everything I had. I moved to the home of biotech, San Francisco, and I started creating an entrepreneurial model to make healthcare innovation in life sciences everything that I thought it needed to be. And listen, no big company was going to hire me in healthcare. I mean, who was I? I was coming from the tech industry. I had no idea what was going on in the healthcare industry. I didn't even see it as a career before. Right. And so I had to start from scratch. I had to start with just simple questions like, what is the problem around healthcare innovation? Why isn't there more coming out of it? Why isn't it more technologically advanced? Why aren't there more solutions for it? Why does it cost so much? Why does it take so long? And that was the genesis of JLABS, which is now with us all over the world, 13 locations or 600 companies, all working on life-enhancing, life-saving technologies. And more importantly than that, this is a global community of people who really care about having an impact. So in the beginning, you said working on big science. And I would add to that, I like that way you said that. It's big science for human impact.
Good. Yeah.
And, listen, whenever times get tough, I think about that moment in my hospital room when all I had left was to hope and to pray that somebody was out there fighting for me. And that's what we're about. We have a whole army of people around the world that are fighting for people, that are fighting to make sure they stay alive and they can go back to their loved ones. And no better moment in time to express that, to show how important that is than right now with COVID-19. I mean, how many people are suffering right now, and how many people on their deathbeds can't even be in the same room with their loved ones. And so there are so many people on the front lines of that who are making sure that those people are cared for and they feel like they have family with them. And that's what I hope everybody feels, that at JLABS, you have a family you don't know. You may not know our names. You may not see our faces, but you got to know we're out there. We're fighting for you.
Yeah. And look, I know those people, Melinda, because I work with you guys all the time. And I know the people on your JLABS team, and I know lots and lots of those companies that you are no strings attached incubating and connecting out in the world. And, it's one of the bright spots in this whole thing for me to just know that I get to play a little part with you guys playing a much bigger part in making that human difference. And speaking of being human, there's a piece of that story that I'm particularly fond of, your not very well kept secret about why that prestige and money was so important to you when you were younger and working at that telecoms company that actually makes what you did even more remarkable, I think, right?
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing that part with us?
Yeah, sure. It's always hard to tell the story. I came from a very humble place. I was born into an 864 square foot home at the end of a little dirt road in northern Saskatchewan, Canada. And I lived in that home with my 5 brothers, my 3 sisters, my 2 parents, and that home had no running water, no plumbing, and no electricity. So, as you might imagine, particularly in the winters, life could be quite challenging. Oh. So, from the time I was a little girl, I was bound and determined I was not going to be poor anymore. And it's something that I can't tell you what it feels like to be poor, where every waking moment, everything you think about is how much something costs and can you afford to do that or not. And so when this opportunity out of college came with this big global telecoms company, and it was good money and it was traveling around the world, I'd never been on an airplane until I went to interview with this company. Like at my my beginnings were quite humble, and so that was why it was really important to me, and that was why I don't think there was any other way I would have transitioned to doing what I was doing, because I was so scared of being poor. Yeah. I mean, it's something I just have held on to, and it's still it makes me emotional, because I don't think people will talk about, feeling bad for people who are poor. You don't really get it till you've been there. So it was tough, but there was something that happened, there's something about facing your own mortality. I call it the smell of death in your nose. Yeah. That's actually very liberating. When I was on my deathbed, literally, I had this image of myself of being completely naked, lying on a bed of money. And what that meant was that it did nothing for me. When it comes to answering that question, have I lived my life well? It means nothing. You come into this world alone, you leave this world alone, you come into this world naked, you leave this world naked. It's all about what can you say you did with your time. Yeah. And nothing scared me after that. I quit my job, which should have scared me. I also felt, nothing got me out. People complain or the gossip or whatever. I was just, the sky never looked so blue. The grass never smelled so fresh. So you just lived on this wave of happiness of just being alive. Yeah. And so it gave me the courage I needed to do something that I felt would have impact. And listen, at the end of the day, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, if I'd known how hard the road of risk-taking was, I probably would have never done it. So glad I didn't know. Because healthcare is hard. And this is what I think people are starting to wake up to. So back to COVID-19. People are starting to understand how hard it is to create a drug, a vaccine, how long it takes, why it's important to follow the science, why it's important to have a disciplined process, because you're going into human beings with these drugs or these vaccines that have to be safe in addition to being efficacious. And that takes time. It takes money. It's risky. All of these companies that are going at risk, creating manufacturing facilities. Manufacturing and drug development is like high science still. It's not like a widget. It's still like you're creating a whole new process. So, it is tough to do. It's not for the faint of heart. But when you can see people come out of the other side of it, whether it's children or parents or grandparents, and see the impact that can have for them, and that makes all of those mountains that you climb worth it. Yeah,
that's fabulous. Well, I am strange to say, I know, but I am glad you almost died. Emphasis on almost. Yeah. So that story is really powerful. And I wonder what your I know I have my perspective on it because I've been, along on your ride, gosh, since 2010 or 2012 or something like that. And so what is your perspective on what really telling that story well? Because here's what I'm going to say, and you tell me if you agree. I believe that you tell this story regularly, which I think is actually generous because you've heard it a million times, but they haven't ever heard it. And it gives people a real insight into you and what matters to you and where you're coming from, that I think is actually a tremendously generous offering for people to make. And I wonder if you believe this story has made a difference for you. And if you do, tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. It definitely has made a difference for me. And it's not my natural inclination to tell personal stories like that about myself. Certainly back then when I started telling the story, and I ended up telling the story by mistake. Not by mistake. I was in a situation, and I got into this large forum of 1,000 people. And I didn't realize I was the keynote speaker. I thought I was going to a little event of 30 people. And it was I can't remember what the organization was, but it was about inspiring a bunch of high school students that were sitting in the front rows to get into science. And that's why I thought, okay, well, obviously I need to tell them something that they can relate to and that they can connect to and that they can go home and tell their parents about and get inspired about. Studying STEM programs, science and technology, engineering, math. And so I told my story, and I come from a German background. We do not share story. We're not very personal. We do not talk about our feelings, none of that. So that was very uncomfortable for me. But the response I got was amazing because people can connect to your humanity. You can spout off all sorts of intellectual stuff about the science and technology you're doing, and they'll maybe remember, 10% of it. But if you tell them something that's very personal about your humanity, your vulnerability, your story, they will not only connect with that, but they'll tell other people about that because the old expression, no one will ever remember what you said or how you said, but they'll only remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
That's what people go into dinner parties and talk about. And it's amazing. I think the whole JLABS brand spread like wildfire all over the world, despite the fact that we actually don't spend very much money on marketing at all, hardly anything. Yep. The reason the brand has spread is because people connect with the story and they tell the story and they feel like they're a part of it. And part of the story that I think also made a huge difference, which you inspired for me, which is you can tell somebody about how to do something, and they'll say, oh, that's nice. I could never do that. But if you could tell somebody how they can do something and they could really do it themselves, then that will make them feel empowered and inspired. And that's exactly it. My story in one sense is I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not. Right. But the story is very human, and it shows how a little girl at the end of a little dirt road with not even 2 pennies to rub together can create something that can spread around the world and create hope and create health and humanity. And I did it without having a big trust fund behind me, for sure. I did it without having a whole lot of tools, just grit. Pure grit and common sense and problem solving and connecting with people and drawing people in. And that's what the power of storytelling is about. It's worth far more than a huge bankroll behind you. It helps get the bankroll behind you. But that is how you inspire people. And I think that's what makes companies come to life, brands come to life. and solutions to be carried forward to the people who need them.
Yeah. So then it sounds like it's not something that would just work for Melinda Richter. It's something that, it sounds to me like this is something that any leader should really consider and find their story and be willing to share their story, even if they are German and don't want to talk about themselves. And right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a good analogy to it also is if you're speaking English and the person you're speaking to speaks French, it doesn't happen if you keep speaking English to them. You have to figure out how to speak in their language.
Yeah,
and,
great.
Something that another thing you always say, which I love and I repeat to everybody, is don't be nervous, be at the service. So don't think about what you want to say. You want to think about how you want that person to feel and the impact you want that person to have after, having heard your talk.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful thing. First of all, it gets you out of being anxious and, I gotta be brilliant. I gotta tell my story perfectly. And instead puts you, in a place of service of that person. What do they want to hear? And listen, most people are really excited to hear from you. They want to learn from you. And so tell a story in a way where they can feel something and walk away and do something about that.
Yeah. Fabulous. I love it. So Melinda, you are one of the most requested speakers, I think, at Johnson & Johnson. And people always talk about what a fabulous communicator you are and what a great speaker you are. And I wonder, did that just come to you totally naturally? Is that something you just wake up in the morning and, doesn't matter what it is or where it is? Or are there any secrets that you have about how you got to the point?
There are secrets. And listen, I coach a lot of people to speak as well, because we have lots of our companies do presentations to our leaders at J&J, and we get you to help us a lot. Mm. And the first thing I think that's important is, first of all, first principles, think about that person hearing what you're saying and making sure that they can actually not only hear it, but understand it. So keeping it simple and making it meaningful and making it personal is job number one. And two is prepare. I mean, I don't care how well somebody seems when they're up there talking and it seems like it's just off the cuff and they never practice and look how amazing they are. That's simply not true.
It doesn't happen that way.
It just doesn't happen. I prepare. And it takes a lot of work. Even though I've done even my talk that I do a lot, every time I do it, I try to customize it for that audience. And so it takes time, and you've got to invest that time, and there's no shortcuts to that. Yeah. Anybody who tells you that there are shortcuts to that, they're lying.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So, Melinda, but here's a question for you, because I work with a lot of really busy, top global forward-thinking leaders like you. What would you tell someone who's in a similar position to you, someplace else, who doesn't think they have time to practice?
Oh my gosh, I hear this all the time and I say bullshit.
That's pretty blunt. I like that.
Oh, yeah. I call bullshit. I have this, listen, if you remember when I did my TEDx talk,
I do.
I was on fire. I was launching JLABS at the time. I had my own company at the time. I had multiple other clients. I had zero time to prepare. Yeah. And so I had to figure it out. Like, it's just life. You got to figure it out. You only have so much time, so much money. Yeah. And so what I would do is every time I had a moment to think, I was figuring out my talk. So when I was in the car commuting, when I was in the shower, when I was brushing my teeth, when I would figure out the moments that would help me figure out what I was going to say, and not just figure it out. Anybody who writes down their talk and say, listen, I wrote it out, I got it. again, bullshit. You've got to say it out loud.
Out loud, yes.
Out loud. And you've got to tape yourself and you got to listen to yourself. And it's the most excruciating thing. I mean, if you want to torture yourself, you can either pluck out your eyelashes or you could do that.
Yeah. It's pretty similar.
But you have to do it because you want to hear how other people are going to receive it. And it's funny when you hear yourself, first of all, you usually don't like the sound of your voice.
Right.
So there's that. But suddenly you'll say something and you don't realize how it may be offensive the way you're saying it until you listen to yourself on a tape recording. You're like, whoa, I had no idea I was saying it that way.
Yeah.
And then you have to keep saying it until you get it to a place where you're like, somebody can hear that and take it in and process it now. Yeah. So it's so important to, and voice notes is on your iPhone.
On your phone. Yeah. Yep.
And that's what I'll do is I'll think about, a key, element I want to talk about, and I'll talk about it. I'll think about it in my head. I'll say it out loud in the car, in the shower, and then I'll voice note it, and I'll listen back to it, and I'm like, oh, no, that's it. Yeah. And then I'll do it again, and then I'll do it again, and then I'll do it again. It's excruciating discipline. But that's what makes it work.
Right. Well, and so now I just want to say for anybody that's listening, I don't think that there would be a lot of pushback on the fact that Melinda has a really lovely voice. And if you could see her, go check out a picture of her. She's gorgeous. And I just want to point out that even someone with a really beautiful voice who's just clearly objectively gorgeous finds it excruciating to listen to herself on tape, and watching yourself on video is probably not the first thing you want to do. Me too. Me too. Still, it's just embarrassing. And what I hear underneath everything that you're saying, though, Melinda, is this idea that you are willing to not just take responsibility for what you say and check the box, oh, I said it. You're going way out of your way, doing something that is excruciatingly difficult to check the box, they got it. And that to me is just a fundamental act of leadership and generosity. Like I just, that's just so inspiring to me. And I love it, and of all the people, of everybody that I know in the world, you're in the top 1% of people who could probably technically say, well, I don't need to do that anymore. And yet the reason you're in that top 1% is because you don't say that and you do keep doing that. So I just really want to acknowledge you. And I want to point out to anybody listening, it's not just you, who doesn't want to do this, who thinks they sound awful on tape. Like that's everybody. So, good on you. And thanks for being willing to share that, because I know from talking to people that, it's our natural tendency, right? We go, oh, she's got something I don't have. She's special. She doesn't need to do that. She just wings it. No.
No. And that's, I think, the key is to believe in yourself. One of the things that I want to inspire in people is the confidence that they could do it too. And with that confidence that you can do it too comes a hell of a lot of hard work. The people who get to be successful at what they do, it doesn't just happen for them. No. It's they work their butts off for it. And there's no shortcut to that. And, sometimes you get lucky. And a lot of times luck plays a big, big part in it. But it really is about good old-fashioned hard work and being smart, and having the right people around you, and making sure that you're objectively hearing everybody and bringing everybody to the table who has a different perspective than you do. That. I mean, there's so many different things around that, and all of that requires good old-fashioned hard work and discipline. So anybody can do it. And I've seen amazing transformations of people you've worked with and I've worked with. it's really remarkable to see the difference between somebody who works at it and then the impact that they can have. Yeah. And people who don't, and it's, listen, we've had some of our CEOs that we work with together, and gosh, we are drill sergeants.
We're drill sergeants. That's right.
We are drill sergeants.
Drill instructor for your greatness.
Exactly. And it makes a huge difference. And it has such a meaningful impact to the people who are going to listen to you, and you can change lives. You can change lives by sharing your story and having enough care and attention to make sure that your story resonates with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's so important. I think it's because a lot of people, you know me, I was always the guy with the soft skills, and they called what I did fluffy, and I think you might have had a similar experience. And yet I think it's the number one most important thing. I read a book years ago by Peter Guber, and he said, when I succeeded, it's because I had a great story to tell. And when I didn't succeed, it's because I didn't tell a great story. And that, his whole life of all these business deals and owning sports companies and working for running Sony, and I just, like, it all came down to, when I succeeded, it's because I had a great story, and when I didn't succeed, it's because I didn't have a great story. And that sounds so illogical, and yet it's so fundamental to being human, and just how it actually works.
I have to say, I was on stage once with this. I was doing a fireside chat with this very, very accomplished CEO, scientist. And I was really excited that we were on a big stage. It was like a few thousand people, and I was excited to interview him. And, clearly, again, very accomplished person. And we got up on stage, and he just couldn't articulate a story. And it was such a shame, because he's a brilliant person.
Yeah.
But people lost confidence in the company. People lost confidence in him. And most importantly, people lost confidence in what the impact this company was meant to have. Yeah. And that's why it's so important. It doesn't matter how much you've accomplished in life. These are in one sense, very basic life skills. And we're all very humbly at the beginning are novices. Yeah. And we have to take responsibility for the impact we're meant to have. It's just that simple.
Yeah. I mean, it's where that saying that I have comes from. Communicating with human beings is not logical, it's biological. And I've just seen so many people who are objectively brilliant. Like, they're clearly brilliant, and they've got so much to offer. And yet, because they don't have that piece of being able to communicate well, they get on a stage in front of thousands of people to do an interview and crash the confidence in them and their company, not because they did some poor science. That doesn't have anything to do with that. It's because they can't communicate well. And I think everybody from Warren Buffett to Peter Guber to anybody that you would follow as an expert in business, their first principle is be a good communicator. And particularly, I think, in front of groups of other human beings. And, it was one of the things that Ted really taught me is, and I just realized this a little while ago, but I knew something was there and I couldn't articulate it. I believe that why TED Talks got so popular is because that is the original form of communication. That's how everything happened for the entire time that we were evolving. Up until seconds ago in the historical perspective, was one person in front of a group, and the better they articulated their thoughts and the better they were at communicating with human beings, the more likely that idea was to happen. And that's what we're primed to respond to at the deepest level. So it's just the most important thing, I think, if you really want to have go out and make a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we're as human beings we're very simple. We can only take in a few things at a time, and we want to be touched by it. So,
Yeah.
and it's funny. I think there was an expression. Maybe it was Winston Churchill who said, "Listen, if you want me to do a talk for an hour, that's fine. I can prepare that in a day. You want me to talk for, half an hour? Oh, well, that'll take me, a week. If you want me to, speak for 10 minutes, well, that'll take me a month.
Yeah.
If you want me to do 5, it'll take even longer, because the shorter the amount of time, the more crystal clear and simple you have to get your message so that people can walk away and be changed because of it. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of that.
So, Melinda, for other leaders and for startups, and what would be your advice when it comes to telling their story? Like, what's one thing that you would tell your fellow leaders and that you would tell those that are in startup companies, the kind of people that you work with all the time? What would be one thing you would say about telling their story?
So the story, first of all, has to be clear and simple, and one that somebody can say, I get it, right? I deal with a lot of scientists, and usually their story is so conflated with all of this jargon and technical stuff because they want people to be impressed by that. And what happens is people just glaze over and they lose the plot. And I've also found with some people who coach those people, they feel uncomfortable with calling them to the mat and saying, I don't understand. And everybody thinks, oh, somebody else probably gets it. I'm probably stupid.
That doesn't help.
The fact of the matter is, if you don't get it, there's probably other people who don't get it. And I've had it's funny, I've had scientists, my team coaching these CEOs, and, I'm not a scientist by training at all. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody talks about their science, and I look at my colleagues, I said, do you understand? They're like, oh, yeah, we get it. I said, okay, well, then explain it to me so that I understand it. And suddenly, blank stare goes on. Yeah. So the power of simplicity in your message so that the average individual can get it. And yet it, still has all the scientific merit behind it. It's so important. You really have to challenge yourself to think about, is this simple enough? And if you can't explain it simple enough, then maybe actually you don't get it either. So I think that's the number one principle, is make it very simple and relatable, and mostly, do it in a way that brings the human element to it as well. How do people connect that to who you are as a person, and why you're working on that? Why do you care about this at all? Why should anybody care about this? I'm so glad you said that, Melinda, because it brings back a number of different people that you and I have worked with together. And I won't name names because that's not the point. But very often when we have scientist founders, I would say that I've had it's like pulling teeth to get them to give anything personal or human about themselves, because it's just what they just get trained not to do that somehow. It just seems wrong in science, and yet anywhere in the world where you want to make a difference and have an impact, you want to raise money, you want to have partners, you want to all that stuff, it's the humanity that allows those people to say yes and connect with you and sign the check and all that stuff. So, I'm thinking of a couple in particular, but when we finally got them to share that just kind of simple, not even such a big deal. It wasn't like some huge revelation, but it was the real human emotional reason they were so committed to what they were doing with their company. It was just transformative, unbelievable, so I would just reiterate what you said, that humanity
and being willing to share that, even though particularly maybe for scientists or folks with the hard skills, it feels so scary to do that. It feels so unnatural. I shouldn't do that. But I think that, everything we've talked about up to this point shows just the power and the importance of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's how you build loyalty and commitment and action.
Yeah. All of it.
Yeah. One of the scientists you were talking about, he was talking about this amazing new discovery to shorten the drug development process, focusing first on oncology, and he had all these very fancy things to say. And then we just said, time out. He said, why did you decide to work on this in the first place? And it turns out his mom got cancer.
Make me cry.
And he was a world-renowned scientist at Stanford, and even he couldn't save her based on what was out there today. And he said, listen, this is not all right. I've got to figure out how to save other people's moms.
Yeah.
I can't save my own. And it was so powerful to add that element to the story.
But it's totally different. It was like 0 to 1, Melinda, I remember. And one of the key lines from that was, up until that moment, he loved the intellectual challenge, right? It was all an intellectual challenge. And then that experience made it personal. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And guess what? Like, as an investor, as somebody who's going to join a team, as somebody who's going to partner with this person or that person, to hear that part, that's the deal clincher right there.
Well, especially when you're doing something new, like in a startup, let's face it, when you're trying to change the way the world has worked before, you come up against a lot of obstacles. There's hurdles. There are people who don't want you to change the world and will actively go against you to do it. And to be able to do that, you have to be so inspired by what you're doing that you're willing to knock down every wall on the way there. And people have to understand that about you. They have to believe that you believe. And when you connect it to something that's personal to you, well, suddenly investors say, well, that person's not going to quit. I'm willing to put $10 million on that person because no matter what comes in their way, they're going to knock it down to get to the finish line. Same with getting people to come on and be a part of your team. They want to follow somebody who's going to lead the way, who's going to knock down every bush and climb every tree to make it happen. And that's why sharing something personal about yourself and why you care about what you're talking about is so important.
So important. So the question that I wanted to ask you at the very beginning is, if you were now in that position you were back when we first met, when you were doing the TEDx talk and sharing the story about the bug, if the story began now, something like this, Melinda, I want you to fill in the blank. Many of you have heard the story of how I was bitten by a bug and almost died, and that led to the beginning of JLABS. Well, what's that story look like now as you look back over the, almost 10 years that it's been since that happened and you started the company that became JLABS, and, what is this next chapter looking back on? What do you think are some of the key elements of that story?
I think the next chapter to talk about, and I wish I'd known this when I was younger, and I hope other people learn this sooner than I did, which is that we're all very powerful. We need to own our power. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to speak up. And, I've had the great fortune of working with some of the, most prolific minds in life sciences and healthcare. And, I'm not a scientist. And I've always felt like, maybe they know better than I do. And one of the things that I've learned over time is, we all instinctively know the right things to do.
Yeah.
They're right for us. They're right for other people. And whether it's our own fears and insecurities or other people's fears and insecurities, that sometimes we let all of that hold us back. And we don't say yes to opportunities. We don't say yes to things, or we don't speak up against things when we need to. And if there's one thing I would, if I could tell my younger self, is to own it, to believe in yourself, to live your truth. And people look at me and they say, well, you've done that, right? You seem so confident. And it's funny, like in many ways I am. And in many ways, just like the rest of the world's public, you can see many of the most successful people would still say, listen, there are times when I didn't say yes to things I should have said yes to, that I let other people shape how I viewed things. That was outside of what I would have wanted to do. So I hope that as younger people rise up through the ranks, that they're still respectful, still responsible with their words and their actions, but they don't apologize for what they're thinking and they're feeling, and that they move forward with a self-confidence that I think sometimes, comes too late in life. Right. After you've weathered many storms and you realize, you know what, I got it going on. I know what I'm doing. But that should happen sooner.
Yeah, good. Put that monkey mind in the backseat and trust yourself. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right. The monkey mind.
I love it. I think it's really, I think that it's generous of you to say that and share that, because you are one of the people who from the outside seems like she's got it all together, and I know that feeling of looking at somebody and thinking they've got something I don't have. They're smarter than I am. They're better than I am. They've got it all together. What's wrong with me? And over the years and years and years that I've been doing this, it's become really obvious to me that the only people who don't feel like that on a pretty regular basis are so classically narcissistically out of touch that they're not really functional human beings anyway, So, and I think it's good to know that as a young person or as somebody who's an emerging leader. And it's good to know that as somebody who's like a top of the pack CEO, leader of leaders. That is a natural part of being human. And I think that it demonstrates a self-awareness that's really wonderful. And it's good to not let it pull you down, and don't let it interfere with speaking up and standing up and everything, and know that it's part and parcel of the whole experience, right?
Yeah, I think it's in some ways it's very good to question ourselves. It's always and it's good to say, geez, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. So what do I need to do to make sure that I can do this?
Right.
Surrounding yourself with smart people, preparing, taking the time to be thoughtful, all of those things is back to the original comment, which is success is not luck. I mean, luck plays a role for sure for everybody. Sure. But as they say, luck favors the prepared mind. And it's all about, having enough, as you say, self-awareness, say, okay, what am I good at? What am I not good at? How do I count for these things? But overall, do I have the passion to do this? Absolutely. Do I have what it takes to do this? Absolutely. Am I going to have to fill in some gaps? No question. How am I going to do it? Here's the list, and then go out and make it happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think everybody feels it, and nobody likes to talk about it.
Right.
And I like to talk about it so that people know they're not alone.
Yeah.
And that's why I want everybody to feel you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, you're not alone. It's real. And you know what I like to do now is just name it. Even if because sometimes I'll go through it, even with COVID-19, some days I'm like, I'm feeling something right now. I don't really know what I'm feeling, but what am I feeling? And I'll just take a moment and say, I'm feeling really sad right now. I'm feeling very frustrated. I'm feeling, very alone. I'm feeling very stressed. I'm just naming it sometimes.
Is so good.
Helpful.
And it reminds me of something that I think we've talked about before that I think it fits right in with your message, this piece of your message, which is, you're not crazy, girlfriend.
No.
If you think something's going on and you've really thought about it and it still seems like something's going on, guess what? Something's going on. You're not crazy, Trust that part too.
Oh my gosh. That's what's interesting about that is we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion. And I gotta tell you, I believe my journey would have been very different if I were men. If I were a tall, good-looking man, with a PhD or an MD, no question. And, all the biases that we're on the back end aren't as overt as, I imagine them to be. Many times it's very subtle, little things. And again, it's one of those things. Is there something there? Is there not? And I've learned to trust myself and say, that is something there. There's definitely something there. And once you name it and you say it, now you've kind of got a little box that you put it in. And then you can figure out how to deal with it. And maybe sometimes just dealing with it is all you can do is name it. At least you've empowered yourself. I see you. I see it. I see what you said. So
that's good.
It's a huge part of that.
Yeah. So is there anything that you've learned? And Melinda, I know that we're coming up on an hour. I've got time to go a little bit longer if you do, but I want to be really respectful. You probably have to go to a call.
Yeah, I gotta go. But this is so amazing. Thank you for creating some space and time for us to have this conversation.
Well, you're very welcome. And I appreciate you showing up to this conversation. It's just a pleasure. And, thank you for what you do. Thank you for the people that you empower and the things that you make possible. And, in a public forum, I know I've said it privately before, but just thank you so much for believing in me and seeing something in me and being willing to bring that out in me. And I just will never be able to thank you for the gift that was and is to me, but I won't ever stop trying.
Well, listen, again, I think it's one of those things where you have something that's very special. You've always had something very special, and I just called it. I named it. And
the power in that, right?
And the power in that, and what an impact it had for me, and how you can have an impact for so many more people in that way. And it's amazing. I think you don't have to go out and cure cancer for kids. You don't have to figure out the climate change for us. Any little thing that you can do is powerful. And it could be something that's very simple, but if you do it well and you believe in it and you're passionate about it, that'll make a difference. And you certainly made a difference for me. And I love the fact that I was just a small part of saying you should share that with the world. So please continue to share that with the world, and you inspire a lot of people, and you make such a big difference for so many people, and how they feel about themselves, and then what they're able to do because they have that inner hero. So thank you for inspiring our inner heroes.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you, Melinda. Good. Well, I'm going to try and get you back again sometime, but we'll let you go. And thanks for sharing all your wisdom with us. And I wish you the very, very, very best.
Thank you. And to you and to all of you out there.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.